Hi, it's Daphne. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be going through my 2022 reading stats. So the biggest, most important stat is that I read 80 books in 2022. 7 additional books I DNF'd, so for a total of 87. And then 2 of the 80 books I read were rereads. I also read a total of 28,242 pages, and then I read almost 60 hours worth of audiobooks. And let's go through some of the graphs. So here is my monthly chart for the books that I read. I read 10 in January, 5 in February, 4 in March, 5 in April and May, 8 in June, 5 in July, 7 in August, 9 in September, 5 in October, 7 in November, and 10 in December. I don't know what happened in December. I went off in December. I think I had a little more free time, which is an average of 6 to 7 books a month. So that's pretty good. Especially because a lot of the time I was reading 5 books a month. So 6 to 7 feels pretty successful. I always try to read at least 5 books. Jumping into the genres I read, I'm just gonna round up some of these percentages. I read 84% romance, nobody's surprised. 2 books were sci-fi, real sci-fi, not subgenre sci-fi. 2 were horror, 5 were fantasy, 2 were mystery, and then 2 were non-fiction. So I break down my books into romance subgenres as well. So for these fantasy, mystery, sci-fis, these are purely that category, not romance and then the subgenre of that. So speaking of the romance subgenre, we can go to that next. The biggest section looks like contemporary, which is kind of surprising. I read 34% contemporary. I did not realize I read that many contemporary books. Where are these contemporaries coming from? I'm shocked. And then after that, it's 24% fantasy, 20% historical, 6% paranormal, so werewolves and things like that, vampires, 12% sci-fi. That's pretty much almost exclusively the Ice Planet Barbarian series, though I have read a couple other alien books, I think. Actually, in 2022, I don't know if I read any other alien ones, but maybe I was counting those for monsters as well. I don't remember where I was putting monsters, but I created a new subgenre in my 2023 tracker for monsters, because apparently I need to be that specific now. And then the last one, I had 3 books, about 4.5% for dark romances. I just started dipping my toe into dark romance with all the romance girlies and stalker romance and thriller romance and obsessive people and things like that, or I'm just getting my toes wet with that. Is that a phrase? I'll probably read some more in 2023. I'm excited to try more dark romances. And then for my regular genres, it's probably gonna be about the same, pretty much 80% being romance. I do like to push myself a little bit to try new things. And then for star rating, I originally was not logging that many half stars. I only started doing that maybe in November. So these stats are a little weird. But I have 9 2 stars, 1 2.5 stars, 31 3 stars, which I guess makes sense, 1 3.5, 27 4 stars. Honestly, I think that's pretty freaking good. 1 4.5 stars, and then 10 5 stars. So I am very stingy when it comes to my 5 stars. I do not give them out very often. So having 27 4 stars is pretty freaking good. That puts me at an average star rating of 3.49. Ooh, that doesn't sound so good in an average. Is it because I have too many 2 stars? Yeah, I mean 9 2 stars. The 2 stars are really dragging down my average. I don't have any 1 stars because if something is giving me 1 star energy, I just DNF. I'm not the type of person that feels like I need to finish the book. If I'm not enjoying it, I'm just gonna put it down and give up and move on with my life. So I don't usually have 1 stars. The only time I get 2 stars is when I feel the need to finish it, or I have hope at the end and then just lets me down majorly. Moving on to author gender, I have 92.5% being female. So this is also double counted. If I'm reading a series, I'm gonna count the author multiple times. So I'm counting each book individually. So it's not I read 74 individual women's novels, you know what I mean? But of all the books I picked up, 92.5% of them were women, and then 5% were men. One book was non-binary, and then one book I was unsure, so I just put NA. Author race. This is something I'm also trying to continue to prioritize, as reading diversely. I know the market is very saturated with white authors, so I don't expect it to be 50-50. That just doesn't seem like something I want to force. I want to just pick up books organically but mindfully. So we'll see if I can make this split closer to 50-50 in 2023, but I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm a terrible person because it's mostly white people, because a lot of the market is white people. So we could look up the stats on that too, but I'm not going to beat myself up about it. It's just something I continually want to be mindful about. So for author race, I have 65% of the books as written by white authors. Again, this is taken into consideration series. So I read I don't know, maybe at least 7 Ice Planet Barbarian books, and that's by the same author, and she's white. So that's just gonna really inflate this statistic. I'd be interested to see maybe what this number looks like if I'm going by individuals. 16% were from Black authors, 14% were from Asian authors. I read 1 book from a brown author, 1 book from a Latinx author, 1 from a Native American author, and 1 that I was unsure. I added this stat later on for how long the books are that I'm reading, like their page counts. The majority of the books that I read tend to be between 300 and 400 pages, closely followed by 400 to 500 pages. So I think that's pretty good. I don't know how average that is for everybody else that's reading, but I'd say those are medium, leaning a little longer book lengths. I've read a few novellas, 3 were under 100 pages. I'm not reading a lot of tome books, epic fantasy size books. I'd be interested to get into that a little bit more, but it is intimidating, and I don't know, I just want to read more books, not necessarily longer books. I think I'm pretty happy with where I'm at with this stat, honestly. If I read this again, I'd be pretty content. Then I have the formats. So I read 28 books physically, 46 books via my Kindle, and then 4 books on audio, which is surprising for me because it's not that surprising. It's not a high number, but to listen to something exclusively is pretty rare for me. Then I read 2 books with mixed media. So I read it with my eyes and listened at the same time, which I actually enjoy a lot. If I'm gonna listen to it, I like being able to see it as well. And then occasionally just listen, but it's nice to come back to physically reading it. If something intense is happening and it needs more of my full attention, I like to see it at the same time. For the sources, I have 37% coming from Kindle Unlimited, 30% coming from my owned, physically owned collection. Actually, is it physically? I think it's mostly physically owned, but then some I own on my Kindle. If I'm gonna read it on my Kindle, it's usually from the library or from Kindle Unlimited. And then speaking of the library, I read 26% from the library. Most of the time, that's digital copies. Occasionally, I'll take out a physical book from the library, but rarely. And then kind of going back to talking about pages read, these are the page counts I read per month. It looks like I read the most in September for a total of 9 books. So it's not the most books I read in that month, but they were the longest books apparently I read altogether. So that's interesting. And October, I read the least amount of pages with just over 1,000, even though I read a total of 5 books. I think that was 3 novellas and 2 mangas or something. I don't know what happened in October. I think I had a lot going on. I had Halloween, my birthday, work stress. I don't know. I was stressing maybe. I don't know. October was rough apparently. And then the last stat I have here is standalones versus series. So I read 21 standalone books, 28 were the first in a series, and then 31 were sequels in a series. So that's interesting. It's almost a third for each category for that one. And I know some people are really into tracking their series. I haven't been tracking my series at all, besides this. So I'm not putting pressure on myself to continue series. Sometimes I'll start a series, read a couple, and then not feel that pressed to continue. It's not a big deal, especially in romance books. Each book for the most part is pretty complete, you're not required to like continue on to get like a satisfying story. So I'm not gonna like be like, oh man, I gotta read all 5 or all 10 in this romance series. Like, it's not that serious. But then for like some of the fantasy series, like the Broken Earth trilogy and like the Poppy War trilogy, and I want to do Jade City trilogy and things like that, like those you do need to continue. So I can understand like tracking those ones and being pressed to like finish those ones, because it's definitely not a complete story, or at least the way the story is told isn't fully wrapped up. Okay, so I forgot to do a pie chart for age category, though I did have the stats, so I quickly threw one together for you. So I read 84% adult, 9% new adult, and then 7.5 young adult. I did not read any middle grade books at all, or anything else outside of those 3 categories, which makes sense for me. I do enjoy reading adult books. New adult is like a category that I'm may or may not be like tracking 100% correctly. Like maybe some of the adult books I marked could be marked new adult. Like what is new adult? Like 18 to 22, or like college years? You know, does the person have to be in college? Like, I don't really fully grasp what new adult is, but I at least thought 7 of them were new adult. I'm curious what the young adult books are. This is a little interesting for me. So for the young adults, 2 of them were Heartstopper volumes. 1 was the book Graceling that I buddy read with some of my friends, and then 3 volumes of the Orange manga, which is like a high school shoujo manga. So interesting that most of them are in that graphic novel world, and then 1 was a book I didn't make for myself. Though there was another book that I'm pretty sure I read in 2022 that is considered YA, but I didn't mark it YA for some reason. But for the most part, this is pretty accurate. So those are my reading stats for 2022. I hope you found that entertaining and interesting, and I hope it helped you get to know me as a reader a little bit better. I'm interested to see how my stats evolve in 2023, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe down below if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in another video. Bye!